It's the president's first official engagement after the Eid al-Fitr holidays, and his attention is on addressing the challenges within Nigeria's business environment. To ensure smooth trade facilitation in the country, the Tinubu administration initiated the National Single Window Project, which seeks to address the bottlenecks and corruption eminent in the country's trade system and to also facilitate the clearance of cargo at the ports. The president is here to inaugurate the Implementation Steering Committee, comprising the Nigeria Customs Service, the Federal Ministry of Finance, and the Federal Inland Revenue Service, among other agencies.
This initiative will serve as a catalyst for achieving an average GDP growth rate of 7% annually, propelling Nigeria to new heights of prosperity. Paperless trade alone is projected to bring an annual economic benefit of around $2.7 billion USD. A testament to the transformative power of this initiative.
President Tinubu believes the policy will also enhance Nigeria's trade relations with other African countries while also boosting revenue generation.
We cannot afford to lose an estimated $4 billion in US dollars annually to red tape, bureaucracy, delays, and corruption at our ports. The National Single Window will address these issues headlong, preventing revenue leakage and facilitating effective trade. By doing so, we will create a more transparent, secure, and business-friendly environment that will attract investment and spur economic growth.
From the council chamber, members of the committee briefed State House correspondents at the press gallery, where the Controller General of the Nigeria Customs Service highlights steps being taken towards the reopening of Nigeria's land borders.
In terms of opening the land borders, consultations are already in progress, some of them at very high level. Over the last weekend, I had an interaction with my colleagues in Benin Republic. Earlier, I had gone to our borders in Niger Republic. We are looking at the issues that led to the closures of the border in the first instance.
The president urges members of the Implementation Steering Committee to bring their expertise to bear in charting a new landscape for Nigeria's trade environment. From the presidential villa, Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Muda Yusuf joins us this morning. Dr. Muda Yusuf, I dare say, is a founder and CEO of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Ayo. My pleasure.
National Single Window, Single Treasury Account, and Treasury Single Account, and so many other centralized stuff like that the federal government has had to come up with. This is a new one, or is it something that has been with us before?
Well, it's not particularly new. We have been on this concept of single window for close to 10 years. But for some reasons, we couldn't find the political will to drive it. And the reason being that there are elements within the ecosystem that are benefiting from the status quo, who have been frustrating, this whole idea of single window. Because just as the president said, this is the way to go in this time and age. This is about leveraging technology to facilitate trade. In many other climes where things work well, you don't go to the ports and start carrying paper from table to table, or going to some agencies that are even outside the ports, moving from Apapa to Lekki just because you want to sign some documents to be able to clear your consignment or your cargo. It's the most inefficient thing that you can have.
So when you say some elements within the ecosystem are benefiting from it, were they doing anything outside the law?
Of course. I mean, the president alluded to it, and even the president talked about red tape. And you know, there is also a relation between red tape and corruption.
What I'm trying, the point
Yes.
I'm trying to make is, if they are doing anything against the law, how come that law has not caught up with them until now?
Well, that's a different matter. It's not as if they are doing anything against the law.
Okay.
But when you have a process that is highly bureaucratic, that gives people opportunities for physical interaction, you know, that also gives so much room for discretion, that's a fertile ground for corruption, extortion, and delays, inefficiency, which is also affecting the cost of goods and services. Because when we talk about this inflation, high cost of goods, high cost of living, a good component of it is also coming from the international trade system. So what is being done now is to leverage technology to bring efficiency into the whole process.
At the end of the day,
Yes.
Dr. Yusuf, it's about people. Human beings are at the behest of any technology, whether it's going to work or not. I don't know for how long the Lagos state government with the federal government has been trying to use technology to deal with the issue of congestion at the ports. We are not unaware of efforts being made by some of these elements, perhaps, that you talked about, to make sure that that system doesn't work. I haven't been in that area in a while, but I don't know how effective that has been over the years to ensure that people allow technology to work.
Well, the people factor is a major factor because technology cannot work itself. And just as they say, garbage in, garbage out. And people have all manner of ways of frustrating the system. But the difference this time around from what I'm perceiving is that we are throwing behind this a very strong political will. Because for the president himself to inaugurate this implementation steering committee on single window shows that the president is also committed to ensuring that these things happen. And any obstacles, I'm sure, will not be able to stand, you know, the presidential will to make these things happen. So that is what I think will make the difference. We have people within the system who have the capacity to make things work, who have disposition to make things work. So it's a question of the determination to make it work. And you need the political will to make that happen.
Okay, now there are some promises that have been made according to the information that the president gave us in that brief information on the screen earlier. Part of it is probably be seeing it as well again, to simplify government trade, compliance through a digital platform. That's it right there on your screen. Unlock the doors to economic prosperity and all other opportunities, and a number of others. What are the, for the first one, what are the obstacles or challenges you see in the way? As we said, you've talked about the importance of the people element. And it's not just at the ports, also at the borders. That is why we have people from Customs and Immigration at that meeting. How do we ensure that this system indeed works?
Well, it's going to be an integrated system. And the leadership of the key organizations, I think they were also presented, and they are members of that committee, have a responsibility to make it work. Because this is about a presidential mandate. And the president also has a very strong compliance and monitoring system, evaluation system, framework, to ensure that whatever decision is taken is accomplished. So for me, to make it work is a management issue. A goal has been set. Resources should be provided to make it achievable. If we need to develop capacities of agencies involved, that should be accelerated so that you have the right capacity. If we need to outsource, you know, to bridge any capacity gaps, there should be that kind of outsourcing. Because if there are capacities that are lacking within the public sector space, you can find them in the private sector. So we should not have any excuse. So for me, it's essentially a question of management. Setting objectives, providing the resources, and making sure that these things are achieved. Because this matter is extremely very critical to the economy.
What's important to me, and perhaps to you as a businessman, and to several others, in the business sector and the private sector, as you have talked about, is the impact. So how do you envision this project impacting on business?
No, the
broad trade
the impact will be significant. You know, no matter what sector you talk about, what happens in the import-export processes impact the sector, directly or indirectly. Whether you are in manufacturing, whether you are in mining, whether you are in broadcasting. I mean, we import equipment for broadcasting. And if you talk to those who clear some of these things, they will tell you the kind of experience they go through. So first, there will be an impact in terms of the efficiency. Because when you bring technology into a space, the value proposition is the efficiency that it brings. And efficiency reduces cost of operation. It reduces the time it takes for you to conduct the business. Right now, because of some of these delays, a lot of importers pay a lot of demurrage. And demurrage arises from the delays at the ports.
Do you see that?
And some of these delays were not caused by them. Wow. So the whole essence of this is to fast-track the process and remove all this inefficiency that causes the delays. The second point is the reduction in the human interface. Because the whole concept of this single window is that because it's entirely technology-driven. So you can sit in the comfort of your office, feed in all the data, all the information about your imports or your exports, in a way that all the agencies that need anything to do with it will be able to interact with it online, process it, give approval, you make the necessary payment, and you get your cargo out. So removing the human interface is key, and that also helps to remove corruption. The president talked about corruption. Because the more human interface you have, the greater the risk of corruption. Okay.
Well, you know? One of the comments also made borders on the paperless trade. So, particularly for SMEs, how do you anticipate that such technological advancements will impact the SMEs and by that foster entrepreneurship in the country?
No, it will. I mean, a lot of SMEs are now getting more technologically aware. You know, we are not talking about complex IT systems. It's a question of uploading your information on the portal. Simple. And if you can't do it, quite a number of them also have agents that work with them for these purposes.
So how about all those 100% scanning of
No, it's all part of the modernization. The customs has what they call customs modernization project. So it's a package, and I'm sure this single window will also feed into that. Because I know that a lot of efforts has been made in terms of the scanners, so that you don't have situations where you have physical examination of cargo. Again, this is about technology. So the application of technology is not limited only to the documentation issues. It's also critical for the process of examination of the cargo. And to do that is about scanner. And I'm aware, I don't know how far they have gone as I speak, but I'm aware that there has been a lot of investment in this customs modernization project, which involves the provision of scanners. And even under the previous administration, there are some commissioning of some scanners. I don't know how well they are working, but again, it is the responsibility of agencies concerned that these things work. And if there are gaps in terms of capacity for implementation, those gaps can be filled. If they can't be filled within the system, they can be filled through outsourcing. We are not short of people who have the skills to make these things work. So it's all embracing. It's all about bringing technology to drive efficiency and to reduce cost.
Clearly, this initiative will thrive on collaboration.
Yes.
What are the bottlenecks you see in that regard? Because, you know, it's always a thing of pride for one agency to say, this is the thing we did this one, we want to champion this. Everyone wants to take the plaque, so to speak, for our
No, the point is that...
So how do you see collaboration working?
Yeah.
And what are the bottlenecks you see in the way of that collaboration?
Well, collaboration, up until now, there are issues about territorialism, where people have a territorial mindset, that this is my space, people want to assert their independence, and some of these people who are involved in it are reporting to different authorities. These things are not centralized, and that is why the role of coordination is extremely very important. The president has a coordinating minister for the economy, and he also has a coordinating special advisor on coordination in the presidency. So they have a big role to play, that to ensure that none of the agencies involved in this slows down this process. So it's a question of ensuring effective coordination at the highest level, because that is key, because this is now technology. From the comfort of the office of the coordinating minister, he can examine all of these things. He can see what is happening. There can be systems in place to determine where delays are coming from. And if delays are traceable to any particular agency, those agencies will have questions to answer. On
that, do you suspect the possibility of some kind of sabotage? Because we understand that the former DG of NPA, that had Isabella Mohammed, Bala Usman, tried to push this particular initiative. Do you see any chance of any kind of sabotage from anywhere?
Well, what is important is that wherever that is noticed, there has to be consequences. Again, it comes back to political will.
First of all, let's answer that question of whether or not you see it happening.
Of course. I mean, it's a possibility. If you have people who are benefiting from a particular system, and you now want to change the system, naturally, the risk of sabotaging it or creating obstacles to it, that risk will always be there. Because people have self-interest in the status quo. But we are now talking about the overall national interest, to make this economy work better, to reduce costs, and to also make sure that we even get more revenue. Because there's a lot, I mean, this economy has very huge informal economy. There are a lot of some of these things that are not even properly captured, you know, in the database of either the tax authorities or relevant government agencies. But now that we are talking about technology, we have a lot of valuable data. That is why the president was talking about the impact of this on revenue, because it also has a revenue effect.
Okay. Now, part of the conversation also would be asking the question around how you see this coordination happening, how you see this steering committee working. Who, for instance, which agency would you think should be leading this single window project of the federal government?
Well, I think it should be the customs. The customs have, I think, a much bigger role in this space, because the customs interfaces a lot more with activities that relate to imports, to exports, to import duty collection, and things like that.
But you also know that...
And just as you said, there are other agencies that are also involved.
But you also know that it's in more businessmen such as yourself, particularly those in the import-export business, would consider themselves more vilified by customs. So some will be wondering, wait a minute, why should the customs agency lead this when there are other agencies that they can feel safer with?
No. It's a question of the commitment of the leadership. And I know, because I have some insight into this, that the current leadership of the customs is committed to the reforms of this president. Because he's a career officer and is committed to it. And he has demonstrated a lot of passion about this technology-driven system. And in any case, the final power doesn't lie with the customs. You can see that the coordinating minister is, for instance, the chairman of the customs board. The coordinating minister of the economy, or I'm not sure, he wasn't there because I think he had an IMF meeting or World Bank meeting or so. This is going to be, he's going to sit at top of all of this by virtue of his role as the coordinating minister. Okay. So if there is any lapses from any organization, he has a responsibility to ensure that things work better and the mandate of the president is achieved. And just as I said, Madam Bala Usman is also there to ensure oversight in terms of ensuring delivery. Performance management framework is there.
Being a revenue generating project,
yes,
and being that the customs is not the only one at the forefront, we also have immigration services. You don't think it is something that should be led by maybe an FIRS or something?
Well, FIRS has a big role, but the coordinating minister oversees the customs, oversees FIRS. So it's strategic that he's at the head of all of these things. Okay. And is directly answerable to the president as far as these issues are concerned. So from the point of view of coordination and the critical agencies, I think getting the coordinating minister to be on top of this, I think will give us the best outcomes. Because there is a trade facilitation issue which the president mentioned. There's a revenue issue which the president mentioned. And the key agencies involved in this are reporting to the Minister of Finance, who is also the coordinating minister of the economy. So I think we have the framework to deliver these outcomes. Okay. I think so. One
of the challenges, you have talked about the human interface quite a few times. The challenge of some of our initiatives is never in the people, in whether or not it's a fantastic idea. It's always in the implementation. And the challenge of implementation a good number of times is in whether or not it is communicated and how it is communicated. And by communication, I don't mean just informing the people who are going to get it done. I mean them really understanding what the issues are and implementing to the letter. How prepared would you say the agencies are at our various entry points for this single window project, the implementation?
Well, I'm not an insider as such, so I don't know how much of training, how much of awareness has taken place, how much of capacity building has taken place, but these are the elements that will facilitate the implementation. Because apart from the sincerity of purpose, capacity also matters, because we are talking of an IT-driven system. We need the capacity in the area of IT, apart from issues of integrity and all of that. So those things matter. So for me, again, it's a governance issue, it's a management issue to ensure that whichever agency is part of this has the capacity to be able to function properly, and we can do an audit of capacity. If there are capacity gaps, we fill it up. What is important is the outcome. We have to deliver the results.
Well, a number of other questions to ask you, but let's take one quick break and then my colleagues in Abuja will take you on.
Yeah,
Please stay with us.
Well, thank you for all of the insights that you've provided so far, Dr. Muda Yusuf. To the single window, the fact that you acknowledge that it's not the first time that Nigeria has tried to use this single window portal. And you've also said that, what is different now is this steering committee, and it does appear that there is a stronger will to get it going. So for those who are, currently in business and have to use the ports, etc. I'm wondering how quickly, when the single window finally gets underway, how quickly do you think it should begin to feel the effect?
Well, it's likely to be immediate because we are talking about technology. We are talking about eliminating human interface. We are talking about inefficiencies. The bigger issue or the bigger obstacle to it is the readiness of the agencies to deliver it. those who are stakeholders in the economy, who are business people, they are ever ready to just fill in their information, make their declarations online, do their processes. So in fact, they are very eager, they are excited about it. So once this thing gets up and running, we have seen the implementation committee. I don't know whether there is any timeline that has been given for the final takeoff of this single window. But whenever it takes off, the stakeholders in the economy, the business people, the freight forwarders, they are ever ready because it's also in their own interest. A lot of them are paying huge demurrage as a result of delays. Some of them suffer problem of extortion. Some of them are paying a lot of interest in terms of the cost of fund that they have used to import some of these things. Some of them are carrying huge inventories, which normally they should not be carrying if we had a seamless international trade process. So they are eager. The challenge of the timeliness depends a lot on the readiness of the agencies to deliver, to roll out this. In terms of the private sector, they're ever ready. And once that happens, I mean, we begin to see the impact of the efficiency on costs, on the speed of clearance of cargo, on efficiency, and on top of that, we're likely to see an improvement in government revenue, because this is going to capture all the data that relates to import and exports, so that you can't be somebody who is bringing in 10 containers, 20 containers, and there is no evidence that you are paying any tax. This will help to capture all this information, which is also good for the economy and good for government revenue as well.
I'm looking at the backlog, because right now it does appear that it is people who are about to or who are in the process of bringing in goods who might be benefiting from the president's new mandate. For those who have goods that have already been imported and, are wondering how would they go about it? How quickly, I mean, do you think that it should be prioritized as a show of willingness on the part of those who are to implement this, to get things started and show the tone of the president in terms of what he's spoken about in the single window?
Well, what I will say is that, this is a process. This is about the clearance of cargo. You bring in a cargo, you are moving it through the system, take it out of the ports. For the cargoes that are already here, they are already in the process under the current dispensation. But this is why I was talking about timeline. I don't have information about the timeline for the full takeoff of this single window. If you have the timeline, then we can now begin to monitor. And the stakeholders also have a responsibility to monitor. The agencies have a responsibility to regularly interact with the stakeholders, to get feedback from them on how well this is working. This is a very big project. So the moment it starts, I'm sure everybody will benefit from it. But for those who are already in the process, of course, they have to continue under the current dispensation. But once it starts, and we are now fully applying technology, then those whose cargoes are just coming in or who are just intended to import, they now begin to operate under the new technology-driven platform. So it's a flow, it's a process. Those who have passed through it have passed through the old system. Those who are coming, the moment these systems are in place, they go through the new technology-driven system. The way I think is likely to work.
Oftentimes, when we look at this, and it's a good thing you mentioned feedback. I do not know if there's a process in place for people who will be using this window if they're not satisfied with the service, or if there are any complaints with the system. If they have a process to be able to send their feedback. It will be very important that is also a part of the feature of the single window. But what I want to also highlight is exports, because oftentimes when we talk about business, we're always talking about people bringing in goods into the country. How does this also ease the process for those who intend to export goods outside of the country?
No, it's going to, because this is about international trade. International trade is about import and export. This is about having a technology-driven trade process. Trade is about export, it's about imports. In fact, at a time like this, we should even be talking more about exports. You know, so it's going to apply in equal measure to both export and import. But unfortunately, if you look at the traffic at the ports, it's almost 90% or even 95% imports. And it's a narrative that, of course, we need to change through all these ongoing reforms and so on. But to answer your question, it's something that will benefit both the exporters and the importers. And there's also a need, if you ask me, to even prioritize the exporters. Because right now, there's a lot of challenge with the export process. In the import system, you even have what you call fast track and all of these things. In the export system, there's nothing like a fast track. Sometimes both export cargo and those who are imported, all these things are lumped together.
Do you see
so we need to ensure that we accord a lot more priority even to export in the light of our desire to ensure that we diversify our foreign exchange earnings. That is very key.
Do you see a role for the Standards Organization of Nigeria in that export part?
No, they have a role. Standard Organization of Nigeria has a role. NAFDAC has a role. Plant Quarantine has a role. They have quite a number of agencies. And if you can even seize this opportunity to streamline those agencies, that will also help. Because when you have too many agencies, some of them with overlapping mandates, they also create problems for the system.
So on a final note, the president talked about countries that have significantly improved their trade efficiency after implementing a similar system such as the single window. How do you think Nigeria can learn from these experiences to accelerate our own economic agenda sustainably?
Well, I think it's to share experiences. And I know that even in the process leading up to this, some of those agencies have even visited some of these ports to see how these things are working, because I have information to that effect, to see how these things work in other climes. So this is an opportunity now to put all of these things into practice. It's about capacity. I mean, if all these other African countries can do it, Rwanda, Ghana, and the rest of them, why can't we do it?
Do you see this affecting the price of food directly?
It will.
How?
It will, because there's a lot of inefficiency costs in the import-export process. And if you are talking about food, there are some elements of food that are imported. If you take flour now, you need wheat to produce flour. You need flour to produce bread, to produce noodles, and all of these things. So if it becomes easier to bring in flour, you don't run into problem of bureaucracy, you don't run into problem of demurrage, delays, and all of that, it will bring down your costs. The same thing with raw materials with many of these food processing companies. So once those costs also come down, it should ultimately reflect in prices of food and other items.
If you can do this in 30 seconds, consequences for non-compliance.
There has to be firm.
How?
There are a lot of sanctions that, I mean, we are talking of a presidential order. If you are flouting a presidential order, you are putting your jobs at risk. And if there are even criminal sides to it, you could be prosecuted.